Abusive relationships, also known as battering, are usually discussed as involving the man as the abuser and the woman as being abused. This is a view that some radical feminist groups take because they are appalled that it has taken so long for society to recognize that abuse of women has been a constant in society and that it needs to be stopped. Other men's groups want to show that not all men are abusers, and that studies have shown that men and women are equally represented as abusers. Abusers, whether men or women, can show violence, and that violence negatively affects the person abused and any children that may be around to see it. Slapping, hitting, pushing, or shoving are considered the legal definition of physical abuse. These actions may seem simple, but when put together with an unpredictable abuser, life becomes part of the cycle of violence. The cycle of violence was discussed in class, and begins with tension building in a relationship. It is sort of like a walking on eggshells feeling. This tension will eventually be broken by a trigger. The trigger may be small or big, depending on the abuser. But once the abuser perceives the trigger, then the battering begins. This battering may last as short as a few minutes, or as long as weeks. The terror and danger of it all is enormous. Yet, after the battering, the honeymoon phase occurs, and the abuser apologizes or makes up for the battering in any way they can. This will then eventually lead to more tension and a restart to the cycle. The cycle represents that power and control are essentially what the abusers are seeking, as discussed in class. The type of power one seeks in an abusive relationship was researched by Julia Babcock and her associates in their study of Power and Violence, the relation between communication patterns, power discrepancies, and domestic violence. Their main finding was that power is not unidimensional and can be felt in many ways besides physically. Mental, emotional, and economic power are all other factors in an abusive relationship. This information found by Babcock and her associates lines up with information discussed in class about the power and control wheel. The power and control wheel applies to abusive relationships in general, and what radical feminists will say is that the wheel applies to mostly men. They are not saying that abuse from women towards men does not occur, but rather that it is rare. The textbook Essentials of Sociology by David Brinkerhoff and his associates points out that radical feminists brought public awareness to battering, incest, and date rape. Without these groups, the issue of battering may have stayed unknown to the general population. Essentials of Sociology also points out that a new wave of feminists has come through, and they are more focused on inequality in different groups of women. Yet the radical feminist groups left behind their strong opinion about men, and research on abuse can sometimes focus on these opinions. For example, Gary Birchler and his associates, in their research, The Occurrence of Male-to-Female Intimate Partner Violence on Days of Men's Drinking, The Moderating Effects of Antisocial Personality Disorder, and Deborah Umberson and her associate in their research, Masculinity and Power in Men's Accounts of Domestic Violence. Both research how men abuse women due to factors such as gender roles, alcohol, antisocial personality disorder, and propensity for violence. Their research has interesting points, such as men may feel the need to be the head of the household, but feel undermined when women seem to be so, and lash out as a result. It is also a good point that if men are already close to violence, then alcohol will just get them there faster. Yet, some men's groups will say the same goes for women who feel undermined or drink alcohol. They point out that the research done was purely on men. Women were not even considered for interviews. Kristen Anderson explores this in her research, Who Gets Out? Gender as Structure in the Dissolution of Violent Heterosexual Relationships. She explains that some studies have found equal rates of partner violence perpetration and victimization. It also comes to light that all abusive relationships cannot be based off gender roles. There may be other factors at play, such as the abuser being exposed to violence as a child. This leading men's groups to believe that abusive relationships may benefit from being interpreted on a case-by-case basis. Further studies might help shed light on the issue, but then again, some people will believe what they want to believe when it comes to abusers and those who are being abused. What may be unclear to some is that those who see abuse or are a part of it are severely affected, usually in a negative way. This may be because of the cycle of violence explained earlier. So much danger and stress is bound to have effects. Miriam Ehrenshaft and her associates explore these effects in children who have violent families in their study, Intergenerational Transmission of Partner Violence, a 20-year prospective study. The study found that exposure to violence between parents and punishment are potent predictors of whether or not a child will be abusive themselves. This is because the children are being shown that violence is the answer to problems. The effects may be dampened if conduct disorder or any other antisocial behavior presents itself. Yet, a child will still be heavily affected by what they see from their parents, or by what their parents do to them. Those who are abused have struggles as well, just because they are confused as to how they feel about their abusers. As shown in the video in class, 48 hours till death do us part, one woman was being abused for so long, she feared for the life of herself and her 4 sons. Yet, she could not bear to uproot her family, or pull the trigger herself on her husband, so she hired someone else to kill her husband. The situations are dire, yet the power and control an abuser has may be too hard to break, and that is why the person who is abused becomes confused. Leaving their abuser is also dangerous. In fact, once someone leaves their abuser, their chances for being killed by their abuser go up. It also takes someone an average of 7 times to leave their abuser permanently. Abusive relationships are hard situations, and the amount of danger involved is high. Some people believe mostly men abuse women, but others believe both men and women abuse their partners equally. Either way, at least battering is an issue that people are taking a stance on, because it has come to light. It has also come to light that battering can have negative effects on those who are abused, and those who see the abuse, such as children. Yet, it may be hard for the abused to leave, since the abuser has all the power and control. Dangerous, stressful, and complicated are just the tip of the iceberg on abusive relationships.